My history with the GS. Coming from a background of Japanese bikes, my first experience of a BMW Boxer made me squint. Certainly wasn't love at first sight or at the first twist of the throttle, that's for sure. As for the big GS variants, well, surely if a designer had come up with a blueprint for an adventure bike prototype that had two big cylinders hanging out the side, you'd think he was taking the piss. Surely. But here we are, after 40 years. The GS has forged its own legend in motorcycling folklore, with a following and iconic brand strength that is the envy of other manufacturers. The GS certainly didn't invent the spirit of adventure motorcycling. That's been around as long as motorcycling itself. But I do think GS can lay claim to bringing a bigger and more luxurious side to adventure touring that has become essentially now the new normal. This is a segment of the market that BMW effectively invented, and one that now has almost every motorcycle brand clamouring for a piece of the pie that BMW baked. Most, though, are yet to get the recipe quite as right and as sweet as the Germans. The GS range has grown with the popularity of the brand as smaller and more accessible offerings joined the big boxes. Single-cylinder F650 GS was introduced in 2000, while the first of the parallel twin series debuted in 2007 with the F800 GS. More recently, an entry-level G310 GS was added to a GS lineup that in 2021 now comprises a fleet of models ranging from the Titler 310 right up to the Bavarian burger with the lot that is the R1250 GS Adventure. My own personal experience of GS was somewhat limited until around 2006, when I joined BMW owners on a TS Safari. I've since completed a number of GS Safari and GS Safari Enduro events, and have ridden big boxes in every sort of terrain imaginable. Those adventures have included an epic, largely solo trek from Cape York to Wilson's Promontory, which took in the most northern and southern points of the Australian mainland. Then from the deserts of the Northern Territory and outback Queensland, across some of the highest navigable tracks that straddle the New South Wales and Victorian high country, to countless dirt trails that crisscross Tasmania, I've seen so much of Australia astride a GS. I would say it was around 2008 that I first really gelled with the GS. This model introduced a new era of electronics, with the first generations of traction control and ABS that actually started to become more of a help than a hindrance. Electronic suspension was also first introduced with that 2008 model and signalled BMW as the trailblazer for bringing new innovations in technology to mainstream motorcycling. It's certainly been somewhat of a privilege to have had so much experience with the model since then, to witness, enjoy and marvel at the constant ongoing developments of those systems. The latest 40th anniversary GS models have introduced yet more fine-tuning and improvements to the electronic systems that underline the technological tour de force that is the modern GS. For most of my life, motorcycling has been, for me, a predominantly solo pursuit. I've always enjoyed the isolation of just being with my own thoughts, treading my own path, with very little planning and most definitely no scheduling to ruin the spontaneity of the experience. Hell, I even set out on a 15-day, 16,000 kilometre solo lap of Australia with no real itinerary or plan at all. Always preferred just to roll with it. Schedules and agendas are largely not for me. That said, there's no doubt that the 3 safari events each year had a hefty dose of appeal to being a GS customer, whether you choose the road-oriented TS Safari, the dual sport experience of the GS Safari, or want to test yourself in the more hardcore GS Safari Enduro. I think unless you sign up for some of these events, you really are missing out on a big part of the GS experience. Someone else does all the planning, and that planning certainly is meticulous. You just follow a marked route, enjoy the ride, and have the knowledge that there are backup support services on hand if things were to go wrong. Sure, taking this angle means some of the spontaneity is missing, but the camaraderie amongst the participants quickly builds, and I've yet to encounter any sooks that spoil the party, and you meet some very interesting people along the way. In fact, friendships are made that are only ever rekindled at the next safari, and the one after that. Safari friends, so to speak. This is another facet of the GS experience that many brands have sought to replicate, but haven't quite managed to pull off in the same way. GS Safari events are generally limited to 200 or less participants, and often sell out within an hour of placings being released. If you are yet to throw a leg over a big BMW Boxer GS yourself, I suggest you go and see what it's all about and take one for an extended test ride. There's no doubt the big adventure models can be quite daunting at first, but it doesn't take long before the confidence comes and you start to really enjoy the experience. In fact, BMW can also help you on that score with yet another facet of the GS ownership experience by way of their comprehensive BMW rider training programs, whereby riders of all skill levels can learn how to better control their motorcycle and really learn what it is capable of. Clearly I'm a fan, and if I could only have one bike in the garage, I do really think that bike might well be an R1250 GS. They really do combine an amazing level of street performance with sumptuous levels of comfort and genuine off-road ability in a balance that none of the competition has quite yet managed to match. I introduced two good riding friends that in years past I strafed the Victorian high country with on sports bikes to the GS. They're both handy steerers, were quickly won over by the poise exhibited by this somewhat ungainly design, and that through years of painstaking development has been polished to perform so brilliantly. I put them on GS test bikes that I had on loan from BMW, and it didn't take them long for me to converted. Both ended up buying an R1200 GS of their own. Thus test riding one can prove an expensive exercise, but the only way to see what the likes of myself have been banging on about these bikes for the last decade or more is to get a taste for yourself. 40 years in, the GS has never been better, and it is a core tenet of BMW's heritage. Thus the model will always be a primary weapon in the BMW armoury. Will the 50th anniversary model still be burning unleaded, or will we be at battery technology by then? Will it have progressed to a point whereby an electrically charged GS could be a viable adventure touring mount? Come 2030, I guess we'll find out. But for now we can revel in the unique character that the BMW Boxer has brought to motorcycling, thanks to in its latest guise 1254 cc's of engine that generates an effortless 143 Nm of shove, with a special kind of charisma that, despite all the technology, is still unmistakably BMW from the first press of the starter button.